The conference was supposed to be just another work event. It was one of those trips where you put on a smile, hand out business cards, and make nice with clients. But when they told me that the only hotel room left had just one bed, my stomach did a somersault. I shouldn't have felt nervous. After all, we were colleagues, nothing more, nothing less. But then, there was Harry. He was my rival at work, and that much I could admit. A sharp, calculating mind with a sharp jawline to match. Every conversation with him was an intellectual duel, and every smile he gave was a quiet challenge. But beneath the sharpness, beneath the competitive edge, there was something else, something that I had tried to ignore for the last few months. The way his voice lingered in my mind long after our meetings. The way his eyes, those dark, stormy eyes, always seemed to be watching me, sizing me up. I didn't want to think about it. But here I was, standing at the door of the hotel room with him, the keycard in my hand, and the reality of the situation sinking in. One bed. After you, Harry said, his deep voice pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. I swallowed hard and stepped into the room, my pulse racing. The bed was huge, large enough for two, but the space felt small, too small. Every instinct told me to turn around, to leave, to find another room, but there was nowhere else to go. This is awkward, I muttered, trying to make light of the situation. I dropped my suitcase by the door and stood there, unsure what to do next. Harry didn't answer right away. Instead, I felt his eyes on me, assessing, as if he was trying to decide how to play this. His gaze was intense, and for a second, I felt like I was exposed, standing under his scrutiny. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "Yeah, awkward," he said, and for a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his gaze, something not quite professional, not quite friendly. I wasn't sure what to make of it. "Well," I started, forcing a casual tone, "I'll take the left side of the bed. You can take the right." I turned, fumbling with my suitcase as I tried to act normal. But there was nothing normal about this situation. The tension in the room was thick, palpable, like a storm just waiting to break. I could feel Harry's presence behind me, his energy like a force I couldn't escape. The silence between us stretched, thick and heavy, as I unpacked my clothes. It wasn't just the physical closeness, it was the emotional proximity, the crackling tension that I couldn't ignore. Every time I glanced up, I found him watching me, his gaze unwavering, the faintest hint of a smirk playing on his lips. It was maddening. I set my clothes in the closet and turned around to face him, our eyes locking in a moment of silence. His expression was unreadable, but his body language told another story. His posture was tense, but there was something else, something that I couldn't quite place. "Are we really going to do this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart was pounding, the words hanging in the air between us, uncertain, yet full of meaning. Harry didn't move. His eyes never left mine. "Do what?" he replied, his voice low, like he was savoring the tension. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure anymore. There was a part of me that wanted to push past the boundaries, to confront the unspoken attraction, but the fear of crossing that line held me back. He took a step forward then, closing the space between us. The air was thick with electricity, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to retreat, to avoid what was about to happen. But it was too late for that. "You're not the only one who feels this," Harry said, his voice barely audible now, and with those words, everything shifted. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. He felt it, too. I inhaled sharply as he stepped even closer, his presence overwhelming. My breath caught in my chest, and for a split second, I thought I might crumble under the weight of it all. But Harry didn't give me the chance. He reached for me, his hand sliding up my arm, sending a shiver down my spine. His touch was light, but there was an intensity to it that made my skin hum with awareness. Before I could say anything, his lips were on mine. I froze for a moment, unsure if I should pull away or give in to the rush of heat flooding my body. His lips were firm against mine, demanding but not forceful. My mind screamed at me to stop, but my body responded on its own, melting into the kiss, every nerve in my body alight with the sensation of him. The taste of him was intoxicating, warm, familiar, and unfamiliar all at once. His hand moved from my arm to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair as he deepened the kiss. His other hand slid down my side, the touch gentle, almost teasing, but it ignited something fierce within me. I couldn't think anymore. I couldn't fight it. I pulled him closer, desperate for more. The kiss turned urgent, as though we were both trying to prove something to each other, maybe even to ourselves. His tongue brushed against mine, slow at first, as though savoring the moment. But then it became something else, something raw and hungry. His hands roamed down my back, pulling me against him, his chest pressing against mine, the heat between us unbearable. I moaned into his mouth, the sound barely audible but enough to send a shiver through him. I could feel the hard press of his body against mine, the unmistakable evidence of his desire. And it hit me, this wasn't just about the rivalry anymore. This wasn't some passing attraction. This was real. I had no idea how far this would go, but I didn't care. All I knew was that the boundaries we'd set, personal, professional, had all but evaporated. We broke the kiss for a brief moment, both of us gasping for air, our chests rising and falling in sync. His eyes were dark, pupils blown wide, and I saw the same hunger mirrored in my own reflection. "Are you sure about this?" His voice was low, rough. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, but my body answered for me. Without saying another word, I pulled his shirt over his head, my hands trembling as I traced the lines of his chest, the muscles I had only ever seen in passing, now close enough to touch. Harry's breath hitched as I moved to unbuckle his pants, but I could feel the hesitation in his movements, as though we were both unsure of what came next. But there was no more waiting. There was no more pretending that this wasn't happening. "Do you want this?" I whispered, my lips brushing against his neck. My voice was a whisper of temptation, and I wasn't sure if I was asking him or telling myself. He groaned, low and frustrated, and with one swift motion, he pulled me to him, crashing his lips to mine again. I could feel the urgency now, the rawness of the desire, as if we were both afraid of what would happen if we stopped. His hands moved swiftly, unbuttoning my shirt, his fingertips grazing the bare skin beneath. The touch was electric, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. He paused for only a moment, his hand still on me, and for the first time since this madness started, I looked into his eyes, really looked. There was something vulnerable there, something that shook me. Beneath the hunger, there was a softness that surprised me, made my pulse skip. I hadn't expected that from him, not the cold, calculated Harry I'd known at work. This was something else entirely. "I've wanted this for so long," he confessed, his voice rough, almost desperate. That admission, that raw truth, made my chest tighten. I wanted him, no, I needed him, but it was more than just physical. There was a part of me that wanted to understand him, to break down the walls between us that we'd built for so long. The rivalry, the tension, the competition, it had all led to this moment. And I couldn't help but wonder if it had been inevitable. Without another word, we shed the rest of our clothes, our movements frantic, almost desperate, as if we were afraid the moment would slip away. But the more our skin touched, the more the world outside that hotel room ceased to exist. There was only Harry, only me, only the electricity between us that neither of us could deny. He kissed me again, harder this time, and I felt a rush of heat spread through my body, a need so intense that it left me breathless. His hands gripped my hips, pulling me closer, and I felt the weight of his body pressing against mine, the solid, undeniable evidence of his desire. I gasped as he shifted, positioning himself, and for a moment, everything slowed down. My heart raced in anticipation, the world narrowing to just the two of us. His eyes locked on mine, and I saw the depth of what we were about to do. This wasn't just physical. It was raw, it was vulnerable, and it was terrifying. "You're sure?" he asked again, his voice barely more than a breath. I nodded, my body trembling with need. "Yes." And then, there was no more hesitation. The world exploded in heat and sensation as he entered me, and I gasped at the intensity, the fullness, the way our bodies fit together like they were meant to. For a moment, there was only the sound of our breath, the feeling of skin against skin, the steady rhythm of our movements. But then, the intensity surged, and I felt every inch of him, every inch of us, unraveling in a way that was both familiar and completely new. We moved together, frantic and urgent, building towards something neither of us could control. It wasn't just intimacy. It was something else, something that blurred the lines between rivalry, between the walls we'd built, and between everything we'd tried to suppress. I had no idea how we got here, no idea what would happen tomorrow when we returned to the office and the world we'd built around our rivalry. But for now, it didn't matter. All that mattered was the fire burning between us, the way our bodies moved together, the way our hearts beat in time with the rhythm we had created. We were no longer just rivals. We were something else, something more. And I didn't know what that meant, but at that moment, it didn't matter.